Hello and welcome to this week's myNewsWrap. News from the world of SAP, Microsoft and the world in between. It's episode 65 and that's a great number to have the last episode for this year. Let's start with some not so great news. Unfortunately, of course, on the top of everybody's mind, I would guess, is the Log4j exploit that kept people busy since last Friday. I have referenced within my show notes the official press release of the Bundesamt für Sicherheit in der Informationstechnik, BSI. That was out with the updated information about that. So if you need some official statements on this exploit, I think that's the place to go for especially for German-speaking folks. I've also referenced the announcement of Log4j 2.16.0. That's the go-to release. This one has really removed all the stuff that causes the exploit. From my understanding, also the JNDI lookup, that was kind of the root cause for the problem. So if you have upgraded to, I think it was 2.15.1 or something like that, that was pushed out before the weekend, highly recommend it to go to a higher release. Also, if you are on outdated releases of Log4j, because they are now, as far as I have seen and heard, also subject to more frequent attacks now. Then there is also an update if you're doing a lot with containers and you're having Docker desktop running. Then there is also a new release that came out this week, 4.3.1. which has basically one big improvement, namely you can now use Docker scan in order to check for the code vulnerability of Log4j. So that also helps you if you are working a lot within the container space. Then from the, let's say, SAP side of the house, there is, as every week, the SAP developer news, and they also brought up some information about Log4j vulnerabilities, and also go to the show notes of the developer news, because there are some references with respect to the SAP support launchpad and the relevant notes for XSA. So especially on-premise, of course, is something that you have to take a look at. And also about the Cloud Foundry area. So that's all those things that come together. So please take a look there. From the Microsoft side, there is also one extensive response article out there on Microsoft's response to that code vulnerability. There is a summary and some more in-depth information on different areas like Azure Functions, like Azure Arc, data services, like Azure Spring Cloud, of course, that you can take a look at. Now with that, let's switch to some more positive parts. First of all, the Kyma TechEd session, Build Extensions with SAP BTP Kyma Runtime by Marco Dorn and Jamie Coley, is now out and available as a replay. Of course, as usual with the SAP world, you have to log in order to see this video. So it's not completely free, so to say. You have to be logged in order to see it. Unfortunately, the hands-on session by Gaurav Avi is not yet there. So hopefully in January, I can give you an update on that one. Next, I would like to highlight two blog posts by Carlos Rogan about SAP Event Mesh and using MTLS with the SAP Event Mesh. So it's a two-part blog series. I've referenced both within the show notes. First one is more a general overview about the Event Mesh and the MTLS functionality in there, and how to get along with that, to get a first impression what that means. And then there is a second blog post on the topic that goes more into the details about what you have to do in order to use that within your application. Now, the center of gravity is Event Mesh as well as the Cloud Foundry runtime. So that's the center point of that two blog posts. But again, as usual from Carlos, really some cool, great stuff that it's worth catching up. With that, let's switch to the Microsoft part of the house, to the serverless area. And there is one really nice blog post by Mike Stevenson that I would like to highlight about troubleshooting unusual performance problems for APIs, API management, and Azure Functions. So a very common combination in the Azure world, API management and functions. And you might run into some issues that might be strange, as Mike did. And this blog post guides you through what you can do and what's the root cause for this strange behavior with interconnecting API management and functions. Then, as you know, the Festive Tech Calendar is up and running this week, and fortunately, of course, day 17 was there, and this is the day where my contribution was also featured. So if you're interested in Azure Functions, running on Kubernetes in a completely air-gapped environment, and making use of Dapper with Azure Functions in order to bring in some state to that mix-up, and what Santa Claus and wishlists have to do with that, then this session might be of real interest for you. Okay, that's it for the self-promotion. Let's switch to community contributions again. One blog post that I would like to highlight is about Azure Static Web Apps. It's how to build a recipe block with Azure Static Web Apps and Hugo. So again, a quite common setup for such a blog post setup from my perspective. And this blog post guides you through how you can leverage the capabilities of Azure Static Web Apps in order to make that reality. Of course, backed up by a lot of code samples also available on GitHub. With that, let's switch to the container side. There's not too much news. There is only one news that I would like to highlight, namely the Dapper community call that took place this week. I've referenced the YouTube recording in the show notes, and there are two topics in there that are really interesting. First one is how to bring Dapper and Knative together. I think that's something that will be really interesting in the future if Knative gets promoted as a project on CNCF, because I think then there will be much more drag on the topic, and Dapper will bring some interesting building blocks to that. And there is also a first look at the new Dart SDK that I have also mentioned last week. Yeah, that's all from the container world. So let's switch to the DevOps and GitHub area. And there have been quite some news from the GitHub area again. So there is no pre-Christmas time for GitHub development areas, so it seems. So first of all, a little blog post about code navigation for Python. To be precise code navigation for Python. So really jumping to the right spots within your source code, and also the same functionality within pull requests, which was kind of lacking a bit behind the other languages, and which was now updated and is available also for Python. Then another very nice new small feature, which is especially of interest for enterprise customers, because for GitHub Enterprise Cloud, you can now define custom repository rules, and within the custom repository rules, you can give some dedicated permissions with respect to secret scanning. So is the user allowed to see the secret scanning results? Can he reopen secret scanning results? Can he dismiss them? And so on. So that's, I think, really important for the enterprise area, and that's cool that that functionality is there now. Then for the broader area, from my perspective, also a nice improvement around GitHub Actions. There is now a better GitHub Actions starter experience. So if you build up your GitHub Actions from scratch, you basically did exactly that. You build it up from scratch. Despite the fact that within the repository, there is some metadata information that could be used in order to make that experience better. And that's exactly what GitHub uses now. So when you start your GitHub Actions setup, your workflow setup, GitHub will use this metadata information. For example, is it a node project? And based on that, it will highlight or prioritize in showing you all the stuff around node-related workflows in order to make your experience more smooth with setting up GitHub Actions. So that's really, really, really cool. Then another small, but again, a super useful enhancement is around linkifying selected text. So if you have, for example, a pull request, issue description, you want to link something, you can now simply highlight the text and copy paste a link on top of the text, and you get automatically markdown hyperlink. So that's again something that's quite useful. Then an improvement for the GitHub desktop client, which shows now request checks and pull request check run statuses. That's what it's showing now, which was not available up to now. So you can now even look that up within your GitHub desktop and do not have to switch between tools because you had to do that up to now, but that's gone. So great. If you do not see it yet, update your GitHub desktop and you will have that functionality in place. Then an update around code spaces. Code spaces are now available to collaborators that are not part of your organization. That can be really beneficial, especially when you think about trainings or teachings. That can really help. And what's also interesting, if you have interviews. If you have interviews where you want to do some coding, you can now use code spaces and pre-set up something, and then the candidate can jump in and you can use code spaces in order to make that reality. Also quite nice feature, and I think really important in the enterprise area. Then last week I brought up the announcement of GitHub that there is a new, let's say, private beta around the GitHub code search. And this week there was a blog post kind of backing up the idea why GitHub thinks a new code search engine is needed, and what happened up to now at GitHub around code searches. So how was the first code search? How was the technical setup? What are the shortcomings of that? And why they decided to build a completely new engine based on Rust. Very interesting article, something to read across the holidays, of course. And then one last blog post from the GitHub area that I would like to highlight is from the README project, and it's about open source contributions. And it's about the secret of onboarding new open source contributions. So really interesting article, interesting blog post around mentorship and documentation, which are here elaborated as the key aspects in order to make open source a better place for everyone. So that's at least what the article states. And I think, that's true. And that's not only true for open source software. That is also something that should be kept in mind in companies where there is some, maybe not even inner source in place, but that simply helps a lot with the onboarding experience. Then one last blog post from Microsoft area that I would like to highlight, from an area that I'm not talking too much about usually, namely the Power Platform area, Power Apps. And there is a really cool article from my perspective around Power Apps and what's possible with that. Now, we had quite some topics around low-code, no-code in the last sessions. There have been several podcasts about that, especially in the SAP area, based on the TechEd announcements. Now, this article, from my perspective, really nicely shows the power of these tools. It's about a 14-year-old boy that uses Power Apps in order to, digitally transform the child daycare facility. And that's really nice to read, and a nice showcase that highlights what you can do with a local platform that's already very mature. And of course, Power Platform is one of the front runners within low-code, no-code area, no doubt about that. So that's really something worth to take a look at, and in general, a very nice story. With that, let's switch to the world between SAP and Microsoft. And of course, as every week, the SAP on Azure video podcast is out with a new edition. Again, my heart is bleeding more on the SAP on Azure topic, not that much about application development, or not at all, to be honest, but very interesting from my perspective and very important. And it's about networking and security tools for SAP on Azure. Why do I think that is important as a non-infrastructure guy is that is really the value, the additional value that comes when you lift and shift your systems to Azure. So if you have a SAP system running on Azure, it's not about the VMs and the disks and I don't know what. That's everywhere. What you have, you bring your system into a broader ecosystem that has a lot of stuff around networking security, about other security tools, about threat protection. And that's where the additional value comes from my perspective, when you think about moving your SAP systems to a hyperscaler, in this case, especially, of course, to Microsoft. So if you're working in that area and if you're wrapping your head around that, that's definitely worth watching because there you see how much tools and power you get at your hand when you deploy your SAP system onto Azure. Now, that's all from the world in between SAP and Microsoft for this week. Let's switch to learning and events. So first of all, I would like to highlight a podcast from InnoQ with a little bit of a different topic, but again, something to wrap your head around, and that's about diversity at InnoQ. It's in German, so only available for those who speak the language. And it's called Die Mischung macht's, so the mix makes it. And it's about diversity and how InnoQ deals with that topic. And from my perspective, InnoQ is really a front runner and a thought leader in many areas and also in this area. So definitely worth hearing. And then another video series that I would like to highlight. I've referenced the blog post that announced it by Sebastian Steinhauer. And it's called the 2-Minute Product Owner video series that explains how to be a great product owner. Now, the more critical listeners and watchers might say, oh, product owner SAP, that's not the first thing that might come to my mind. I do not tend to disagree, but Sebastian Steinhauer is the one who brought up SAP Screen Personas. And Screen Personas, from my perspective, is really a role model when it comes to product ownership, when it comes to customer interaction, when it comes to a very healthy community that's built up around that product. And that's why I think this is really worth watching, and this is really worth picking up. Because Sebastian and his co-product owners went down the path, and they have really established a super cool practice around that. And they continue to do that with the Subfiori tooling. Of course, Screen Personas is still also there. And that's why I think, and that's why I personally really recommend this video series. So definitely worth watching. Now to the events area. If you have missed the Azure Developer Community Days a few weeks ago, all the videos are now up. I have referenced the link to the overview page, so you can now catch up with all the sessions that you might have missed, or if you missed everything, well, you can catch up basically with everything. And then one announcement for an upcoming event, namely the DSAG Technology Days. They should have taken place in February next year, but they are now postponed due to the pandemic situation in Germany to May 2022. It's now the 3rd and the 4th of May. With the hope, and I'm also keeping my fingers crossed, that the pandemic situation will be not that severe as it is today, or as it would be probably still in February, to have again an on-site event that I think everybody of us is heavily missing. So let's keep our fingers crossed that DSAG Technology Days in May will take place. And with that, to the area of developer productivity, finishing the year, of course, with Windows Terminal as your default command line experience. There is a new blog post about that one that I've referenced in the show notes. about the option to have Windows Terminal as a default terminal, unfortunately only on Windows 11. It elaborates a bit on that and also where the path will go and how you can contribute feedback on and influence the path where this default terminal experience will head to in the future. And then the last link, the last show note for this year is about Awesome DevRel. It's not a brand new GitHub repository, but I came across that due to a tweet by Mark Drucker. And that's a really awesome collection of tools and resources around developer relationship. And from my perspective, also if you give talks, if you do something like this podcast, there are tons of informations in there around hardware, travel tools, tricks, community management, of course, GIF creation, form creation, all those stuff around that. I didn't know about that. Maybe you already knew that, but that's really some great, cool resource to definitely take a look at. Now, as I said, that was the last show note for this week. So I will go now into vacation mode and enjoy Christmas time. And I hope you do so too. So I will restart the podcast in January. Anyway, next Saturday would be the next date, and I hope you will still unwrapping all your gifts from Christmas next Saturday. So with that, as usual, I wish you a great Saturday, super great Sunday, successful next week, and hopefully already some vacation days in there. And I wish you, your families, your beloved ones, a nice Christmas, a happy new year, some, days in between where you can simply lean back and enjoy the time. And we will see each other again or hear each other again next year in January. Until then, have a great time, stay safe, and bye.